Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, context is everything. Context is Everything Media Network, founder and CEO, John Michael, reading this history textbook cover to cover. The point is to build my historical context, you see. And in order to do so, what I'm going to do now is read the review of Friday's lesson, which was on European expansion and the Crusades. So bear with me as I read my notes. Okay, so the Crusades began in 1096, and they were Christians versus Muslims, who the Muslims were forging their power outside of the Middle East, and the Christians were like, uh-oh. And so in this uh-oh, and trying to suppress the expansion, they had to go eastward. In the Europeans, the Christians, they went eastward and they started to see other cultures. Okay, here's some other cultures. India had thriving cities with stunning temples and palaces. Mathematics that the Indians invented, like a number system, was later adopted by the Europeans. China had flourishing culture and strong government, and they had invented paper, printing, gunpowder, and dozens of cities and coins used paper money, which was a new thing. Ghana, merchants that traded gold all the way across the Sahara into the Middle East and later into Europe. The Byzantine Empire, formerly known as the Eastern Roman Empire, scholars still studied ancient Greek-Roman writings and acted as a trade post for the Muslims, Italians, and Venetians. I wrote a lot of notes, wow. Byzantine Emperor Alexius I asked Pope Urban II. So Alexius I, he's a Byzantine emperor. This means that he's contrasting the Roman Empire, the Roman Catholic Church. He's contrasting them because they're the Byzantine Church, which is like an offshoot of the Catholicism, Christianity. So he's kind of, this is not a match made in heaven, but he comes to the Pope with open hand. Let's see. Byzantine Emperor Alexius I asked Pope Urban II for Christian knights to help fight the Turks. The Pope agreed, and in hopes that the alliance would mend the schism between the Byzantine Church and the Catholic Church. This alliance occurred in 1095. God wills it. God wills it, was the response the Byzantine assembly had in 1096. 1 year later, thousands of knights were on their way to the Holy Land of Jerusalem to fight the Muslims that were there in order to reclaim it. This is the First Crusade. In 1099, Christian knights captured Jerusalem to end the First Crusade. The Crusades continued for 200 years. Holy moly. By 1187, so about 87 years later, Jerusalem had been conquered by the Muslims again, led by powerful King Salah al-Din, or known to the Europeans as Saladin. After negotiations, Saladin reopened the holy city, Jerusalem, to Christian pilgrims. So still under Muslim rule, but he allowed Christian pilgrims to visit. The Europeans mounted crusades against North Africa, African lands held by Muslims. These ended in Muslim victories. By the Fourth Crusade, Christian armies shifted their attention from fighting Muslims to fighting rival Christians. In 1204, Roman Catholic, for lack of a better term, armies defeated Byzantine church rivals and captured Constantinople, the Byzantine capital. In 1291, so now about 200 years after the original capture of Jerusalem by the Christians, 1291, Muslims captured the last Christian outpost surrounding Jerusalem called Acre. So now that the Muslims have strong control over Jerusalem. Enthusiasm for the Crusades brought papal power to its greatest height. We've talked about papal power in the past few days pretty much the whole time. So the Crusades brought it to its highest point, but soon the papal power would fall, as you could tell by the Christians not having what they wanted out of the Crusades by losing the Holy Land and their outposts near it. Favor would also sway from the papacy. Christian European crusades failed to conquer the Holy Land of Jerusalem, but they did expand their cultural development by seeing the greater world around them. In 1271, Venetian-born Marco Polo ventured to China with his merchant father and uncle. After years in China, he returned to Europe and was often mocked for telling tales of the Chinese innovations that he witnessed. They thought that he was lying, but he wasn't. The Reconquista in Spain is where Spain fought off Muslim rulers who took control in the 700s. Muslim rule allowed for relative religious freedom of the Spaniards, but by 1492, Spain expelled Muslim rule, and under the leadership of Isabella and Ferdinand, they started a brutal practice called the Inquisition. The Inquisition was a church court set up to try people accused of heresy, which had brutal consequences for Jewish and Muslim people. The Inquisition prompted more than 150,000 people to flee from Spain in hopes of saving their lives. A lot of these people were also educated and the people that could help forge this new society. But they all left. Okay, that's the review. 6 minutes and 9 seconds, a little bit long for a review, but, we're still figuring things out. I'm realizing, read clearly. That's what I'm realizing. Read clearly is what I'm realizing. I'm going to take my sticky notes from last time, and I'm going to use only 8 sticky notes for my notes. And I think I'm going to start doing live streams of this. And you can, just follow along. I'll post them up after. But the live stream will be basically, I'll read and then I'll post the thing up. I'll do the Photoshop, I'll do all that. It's just going to be a little ambient classroom action. Some vibes. Just relaxation, Chapter 9, Section 4. That's where we are today. I have 8 sticky notes to note things that I find important in this chapter, in this section. Section 4, Chapter 9, Learning, Literature, and the Arts. And this is in the High Middle Age Europe. Learning, Literature, and the Arts. And I'm going to take my time, as I said. No hurry. Unless it gets a little slow. Then I may... whatever. Setting the scene. By the 1100s, Europe was experiencing dynamic changes. No longer was everyone preoccupied with the daily struggle to survive. Improvements in agriculture were creating a steadier food supply. The revival of trade and the growth of towns were signs of increased prosperity. Within the towns and cities of medieval Europe, a few people were acquiring wealth. In time, towns contributed a vital spark that ignited cultural flowering in the High Middle Ages. Medieval universities. This is the first heading. Medieval universities. As economic and political conditions improved in the High Middle Ages, the need for education expanded. The church wanted better education for clergy. Royal rule also needed literate men for their growing bureaucracies. By getting an educated education, the sons of wealthy townspeople might hope to qualify for high jobs in the church or royal governments. By the 1100s, academic guilds by the 1100s, schools had sprung up around the great cathedrals to train clergy. Some of these cathedral schools evolved into the first universities. They were organized like guilds with charters to protect the rights of members and set standards for training. Salerno and Bologna in Italy boasted the first universities. Paris and Oxford soon had theirs. In the 1200s, other cities rushed to organize universities. Students often traveled from one university to another. They might study law in Bologna. Is it Bologna? Bologna, Bologna, medicine in Montpellier, and theology or religion in Paris. Student life. University life offered few comforts. A bell wakened students at about 5 a.m. for prayers. Students that then attended classes until 10 a.m., when they had their first meal of the day, perhaps a bit of beef and soup mixed with oatmeal. Afternoon classes continued until 5 p.m. Students usually ate a light supper and then studied until it was time for bed. Because medieval universities did not have permanent buildings, classes were held in rented rooms or in choir loft of a church. Students sat for hours on hard benches as teachers dictated and then explained Latin texts. Students were expected to memorize what they had heard. A program of study covered the 7 liberal arts. 7 liberal arts? Arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music, grammar, rhetoric, and logic. I'll say it one more time. A program of study covered the 7 liberal arts: arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music, grammar, rhetoric, and logic. To show that they had mastered a subject, students took an oral exam. Earning a degree as a Bachelor of Arts took between 3 and 6 years. Only after several more years of study would a man qualify to become a Master of Arts and a teacher. Women in education. Women in education. Women are not allowed to attend. Were not allowed to attend universities. This exclusion seriously affected their lives. Without a university education, they could not become doctors, lawyers, administrators, church officials, or professors. They were also deprived of mental stimulation that was an important part of university life. An exception was Chrisine de Pizan. Chrisine de Pizan, an Italian-born woman who came to live in the French court. De Pizan was married at 15, but her husband died before she was 25. Left with 3 children to raise, De Pizan earned her living as a writer, an unusual occupation for a woman of the time. De Pizan used her pen to examine the achievements of women. The City of Ladies, she questioned several... in The City of Ladies, which is her book, The City of Ladies. In The City of Ladies, she questioned several imaginary characters about men's negative views of women. She asks Lady Reason, for example, whether women are less capable of learning and understanding as men insist. Lady Reason replies, "If it were customary to send daughters to school like sons, and if they were then taught the same subjects, they would learn as thoroughly and understand the subtleties of all arts and sciences as well as sons." Not a lot of periods, a lot of run-on long sentences, not run-on sentences, long sentences in these quotes. And I have a hard time reading them in the accent, but whatever. So she's saying, Lady Reason says, yeah, girls could learn the same thing boys learn. What's the big deal? Still, men continued to look on educated women as oddities. Women, they felt, should pursue their natural gifts at home, raising children, managing the household, doing needlework, and leave books and writing to men. New heading. Europeans acquire new learning. Universities received a further boost from an explosion of knowledge that reached Europe in the High Middle Ages. Many of the new ideas reached Europe in the High Middle Ages. Many of the new ideas had originated in ancient Greece, but had been lost to Western Europeans after the fall of Rome. Spread of learning. In the Middle East, Muslim scholars had translated the works of Aristotle and other Greek thinkers into Arabic, and other texts had spread across the Muslim world. In Muslim Spain, Jewish scholars translated these works into Latin, the language of Christian European scholars. By the 1100s, these new translations were seeping into Western Europe. There they set off a revolution in the world of learning. Philosophy. The writings of ancient Greeks posed a challenge to Christian scholars. Aristotle taught that people should use reason to discover basic truths. Christians, however, accepted many ideas on faith. They believed that the church was the final authority on all questions. How could they use the logic of Aristotle without undermining their Christian faith? Christian scholars known as scholastics tried to resolve the conflict between faith and reason. Their method was known as scholasticism. Used to support Christian beliefs. Scholastics studied the works of Muslim philosopher Averroes. Scholastics studied the works of Muslim philosopher Averroes and the Jewish rabbi Maimonides. Scholastics studied the works of Muslim philosopher Averroes and Jewish rabbi Maimonides. These thinkers, too, used logic to resolve the conflicts between faith and reason. The writings of these thinkers influenced the scholastic Thomas Aquinas. In a monumental work, Summa Theologica, Aquinas examined Christian teachings in the light of reason. Faith and reason, he concluded, existed in harmony. Both led to the same truth, that God ruled over an orderly universe. He thus brought together Christian faith and classical Greek philosophy. Science and mathematics. Works of science translated from Arabic and Greek also reached Europe from Spain and the Byzantine Empire. Christian scholars studied Hippocrates on medicine and Euclid on geometry, along with works by Arab scientists. They saw, too, how Aristotle had used observation and experimentation to study the physical world. Yet science made little real progress in the Middle Ages because most scholars still believed that all true knowledge must fit with church teachings. It would take many centuries for Christian thinkers to change that way of viewing the physical world. In mathematics, as we have seen, Europeans adopted Hindu Arabic numerals. This system was much easier to use than the cumbersome system of Roman numerals that had been traditional throughout Europe for centuries. In time, Arabic numerals allowed both scientists and mathematicians to make extraordinary advances in their fields. New heading. So, enough of education and learning. Medieval literature. Medieval literature. While Latin was the language of scholars and churchmen, new writings began to appear in the vernacular, or the everyday language of ordinary people, such as French, German, and Italian. These writings capture the spirit of the High Middle Ages. Medieval literature included epics, or long narrative poems, about feudal wars and tales of common people. Heroic epics. Across Europe, people began writing down oral traditions in the vernacular. French pilgrims traveled to holy sites, French pilgrims traveling to holy sites loved to hear the chansons de geste, or songs of heroic deeds. The most popular was the Song of Roland, which praises the courage of one of Charlemagne's knights who died while on a military campaign in Muslim Spain. A true feudal hero, Roland loyally sacrifices his life out of a sense of honor. Spain's great epic, Poem of the Cid, C-I-D, also involves battle against Muslim forces. The Cid was Rodrigo Diaz, the bold and fiery Christian lord who battled the Muslims in Spain. Calling to his warriors, he surges into the battle full of zeal. There are 300 lances that each pennant bears. At one blow every man of them his Moor has slaughtered there. And when they wheel and to charge anew, as many more were slain, you might see great clumps of lances lowered and raised again. Cried out Moor, Mohammed! The Christians shouted on St. James of Grace. One of the field Moors, 1,300 were slain in little space. I changed accents halfway through that. I'll read it in English now. There are 300 lances that each pennant bears. At one blow every man of them his Moor is slaughtered there. And when they wheel to charge anew, as many more were slain, you might see great clumps of lances lowered and raised again. Cried out the Moor, Mohammed! The Christians shouted on St. James of Grace. On the field of Moors, 1,300 were slain in little space. I guess I kind of understand what he's saying. The gruesome war. A lot of people died, but go ahead, do it anyway. And go all in, or something like that. That's what he's saying. Dante's Divine Comedy. Dante's Divine Comedy. In the middle of the journey of life, I found myself in the dark woods, where the straight way was lost. So begins the Divine Comedy by famed Italian poet Dante Alighieri. Dante Alighieri. The poem takes the reader on an imaginary journey into hell and purgatory where souls await forgiveness. Finally, Dante describes a vision of heaven. Abound all hope, ye that enter here, is the warning Dante receives as he approaches hell. Abound all hope, ye that enter here. Abandon, geez Louise. Abandon all hope, ye that enter here, is the warning that Dante receives as he approaches hell. There he talks with people from history who tell how they earned a place in hell. Humor, tragedy, and even endless medieval quests for religious understanding are all ingredients in Dante's poem. His journey summarizes Christian ethics. It also highlights in vivid detail a key idea of Christianity, that people's actions in life will determine their fate in the afterlife. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. In the Canterbury Tales, Geoffrey Chaucer follows a band of English pilgrims traveling to Thomas Becket's tomb. Thomas Becket. He was murdered by 4 knights under the rule of Henry II because he contested something that Henry II wanted to do, and I forget what that is. In brilliant word portraits, Chaucer sketches a range of characters in the Canterbury Tales, including a knight, a ploughman, a merchant, a miller, a monk, a nun, and the 5 times widowed wife of Bath. Each character tells a story. Whether funny, romantic, or bawdy, each tale adds to our picture of medieval life. New heading, Architecture and Art. In the Middle Ages, wrote French author Victor Hugo, men had no great thought that they did not write down on stone. With riches from trade and commerce, townspeople, nobles, and monarchs indulged in flurry of building. Their greatest achievements were the towering stone cathedrals that served as symbols of their wealth and religious devotion. Romanesque strength about, I don't know what the heck that word is. Romanesque, that's what that word is. Romanesque strength. About 1,000 monasteries and towns built solid stone. About 1,000. About the year 1000, monasteries and towns built solid stone churches that reflected Roman influence. I'm not sure what they mean. About 1,000 monasteries and towns built solid stone churches that reflected Roman influences. These Romanesque churches looked like fortresses with thick walls and towers. Typically, the roof of a Romanesque church was a barred vault, a long tunnel of stone that covered the main part of the structure. It was so heavy that it had to be supported on massive, thick walls. Builders provided no windows or only tiny slits of windows for fear of weakening the walls that supported the roof. As a result, the interior of a Romanesque church was dark and gloomy. Gothic grace. About 1140, Abbot Sugar wanted to build a new abbey church at Saint Denis near Paris. He hoped that it would shine with the wonderful and uninterrupted light, unlike the Romanesque, which was gloomy and dark. Urged on by the abbot, builders developed what became known as Gothic style of architecture. The key feature of this style was the flying buttresses, or stone supports that stood outside of the church to support and allow the construction of higher walls to leave space for huge stained glass windows. The new Gothic churches soared to incredible heights. Their graceful spires, lofty ceilings, and enormous windows carried the eye upward to the heavens. Since their brilliance lets the splendor of true light pass into the church, declared the medieval visitors, they enlighten those inside. Cities all over Europe competed to build grander, taller cathedrals. The faithful contributed money, labor, and skills to help build these monuments to their greater glory of God. Art in stone and glass, and we're nearing the end. Art in stone and glass. As churches rose, stonemasons carved sculptures to decorate them inside and out. The sculptures portrayed scenes from the Bible and other religious themes. They also carved images of everyday life that included lifelike forms of plants and animals. Among the most interesting of these creatures were the whimsical or frightening images of mythical creatures such as dragons, griffins, and unicorns. At the same time, other skilled craft workers created stained glass windows that added to the brilliant splendor of Gothic churches. The artisans stained small pieces of glass in glowing colors. They then set pieces of thin lead frames to create pictures depicting the life of Jesus, a biblical event, or other religious themes. Stained glass and carvings served as religious education for people, most of whom were illiterate. Interesting. Illuminated manuscripts. Illuminated manuscripts. In the 1300s and 1400s, Gothic style was applied to paintings and illumination. That is, the artistic decoration of books, such as early Middle Ages monks, nuns, and other skilled artisans, had illuminated books with intricate designs and miniature paintings of biblical scenes and daily life. Characteristics of New Gothic style included bold, brilliant books and decorative detail. Some fine examples of Gothic painting appeared in prayer books known as Books of Hours. Liturgy of the Hours? Artists decorated these prayer books with depictions of towns and castles, knights and ladies in gardens or at banquets, and peasants working in the fields. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember that context is everything. This is John Michael at Context is Everything Media Network, reading a textbook cover to cover to build my context for history. I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy the rain or sunshine or toxic cloud, whatever you may be experiencing.